They call you intense, overthinker, difficult. You ask one question and the room tenses up. You speak honestly and suddenly the conversation dies. Not because you're rude, but because you're real. You notice what others overlook. You question things most people accept without a second thought. And slowly, the gap between you and the world begins to widen. While others bond over gossip, trends, and trivial updates, you're off in your own world, thinking about purpose, mortality, or why anything matters at all. You try to connect, you try to care, but something always feels off. And eventually, the question hits you. Why does no one seem to think like me? Maybe nothing's wrong with you. Maybe the world just isn't built for people who see too much. Let's talk about why highly perceptive and intelligent minds often feel like outsiders, and why that might actually be a sign you're on the right path. It often starts with silence. You're surrounded by people, but you feel like an observer. Others laugh, you're still trying to understand the joke. They talk for hours, but say nothing real. You contribute, but hold back, because your real thoughts feel too much. This isn't about arrogance, it's about depth. You think in layers. You hear what's not said. You see the cracks beneath the surface. And society? It rewards smooth edges, not sharp inside. You're taught to fit in, to go with the flow. But what if the flow is shallow? What if the rules feel empty? What if you can't unsee the flaws in the game everyone else is playing? Here's the quiet truth. Thinking deeply alienates you, not because you're broken, but because you're awake in a world that prefers to stay asleep. Most people don't want truth. They want comfort. And comfort lives in routine, in predictability, in staying inside the lines. But if you're someone who constantly asks why, someone who sees the hidden patterns, the contradictions, then you're not bringing comfort. You're bringing discomfort. You're forcing reflection. And that makes people uneasy. So, over time, they pull away. You get labeled too intense, too serious, too complicated. You learn to filter yourself, to shrink your mind just enough to be digestible. But inside, you're starving for a real connection. Not just someone to talk to, someone who gets it, someone who doesn't flinch when the conversation gets uncomfortable. This tension between depth and belonging was something the philosopher Blaise Pascal hinted at centuries ago. He said, "All of humanity's problems stem from man's inability to sit quietly in a room alone." Why? Because silence reveals truth, and truth is often painful. Most people avoid that silence. They stay busy, distracted, entertained, because to stop and think might mean confronting the emptiness, the fear, the questions they've buried under noise. But you don't have that option. Your mind doesn't shut off. Even when the world wants you to smile and move on, you're still processing, still wondering, still awake. That's your gift and your curse. We live in a culture that celebrates intelligence, in theory, but in practice, we only want the kind that stays in line, the kind that solves problems but never questions the system itself. We praise innovation but punish introspection. We admire genius as long as it doesn't make us uncomfortable. But true intelligence does make people uncomfortable because it sees what others deny. It questions the rules. It refuses to play pretend. That's why throughout history, the truly original thinkers, the ones who refused to lie to themselves, were often isolated, misunderstood, even rejected. But here's the good news. That isolation. It's not a punishment. It's proof you're not asleep. If you feel out of place, it's not because you're flawed. It's because you're aware. You see the world with open eyes, and that clarity costs you something. Belonging, simplicity, comfort. But it also gives you something far more rare, truth. And while that truth may be heavy, it's also freeing. Because once you stop chasing acceptance, you can start building authenticity. You find solitude, not as loneliness, but as peace. You find meaning, not in noise, but in stillness. And slowly, you realize something important. You don't need to be understood by everyone. You just need to stop abandoning yourself. So the next time someone says you're overthinking, the next time you feel like you don't belong, Remember this: the world may never celebrate your depth, but that doesn't make it a flaw. It makes it rare. And in a shallow world, depth is a quiet kind of rebellion.